Hi, welcome to a new recap. Let's dive in with the movie, Leave the World Behind. Enjoy! The Sanford family chooses to take a vacation and rents a home on Long Island, New York. Adjacent to a forest. Though the house is lovely, the liquor cupboard is locked. Amanda, the mother, is driving to town to buy groceries while the family settles in, and she can't help but notice Danny packing his vehicle full of things. Afterwards, when the family visits the beach, Rose, the daughter, spots a massive oil tanker ship off in the distance. They don't give it much thought at first, but they quickly notice the ship is getting closer to the beach. The ship hits the shore, and people begin to panic and flee. Fortunately, no one is harmed, and the beach closes for the day. The family discovers they have no service on their phones or televisions and that the Wi-Fi is down when they get home. The presence of some deer in the backyard surprises Amanda and her spouse Clay as well. They see it as a good omen. Amanda hears a knock on the door as she hears commotion outside in the evening. As Clay prepares to battle a possible invader, two individuals startled him by revealing their names. As it happens, the real owners of the house are businessman George and his daughter Ruth. Amanda chatted with George via email to set up the rent. He's sorry for showing up without warning, but none of the phones are working. They felt they could spend the night in this house because they live on the 14th floor and George has a damaged knee. They went to the symphony in town, and on the way back to the city, there was a complete blackout. George tries to offer Amanda a 50% refund and the assurance that he and Ruth can spend the night in the guest room in the basement, but Amanda rejects his offer and doesn't trust them. In order to establish his identification, he shows that he has the cabinet's keys and opens it to remove an envelope without letting the other person know that a gun is also inside. Amanda is still suspicious since she believes he might have the keys because he is a housekeeper, even if he offers her $1,000 in compensation in the envelope. Amanda needs to be persuaded to give the two a chance by Clay. After revealing that Danny was his contractor, George gives them a tour of this residence and distributes the alcohol from the cabinet. He further clarifies that his wife is on business travels. Amanda stops him to ask for identification, but in the chaos, George forgot his second coat and wallet at the theater. Given that George claimed to have learned about the blackout until afterward, Amanda is understandably alarmed by this. They hear an alarm go off out of nowhere. Ruth has switched on the TV, and they learn that there is a declared national emergency. Amanda is now forced to allow the two to remain in the home. It becomes clear that George knows something when he and Ruth enter the basement room since a client forewarned him. When Amanda wakes up the following morning, her phone has 4 emergency messages discussing the blackout. One of the messages suggests that hackers might be responsible, while the other contains merely strange symbols. She wakes Clay up out of concern so he can see the messages, but they vanish before he can. In order to find out more, Clay makes the decision to drive into town and pick up a newspaper. But he quickly gets disoriented because the GPS isn't functioning either. After he stops the car, he steps out to see if he can get a signal on his phone, avoiding hearing the brief activation of the car radio. According to the reporter, there has been a significant environmental catastrophe in the south as a result of the cyber attack, which has affected animal migration patterns. After failing to make contact on the phone, Clay chooses to continue driving and soon after he sees a woman by the road waving her arms. Clay pulls over since it appears she needs assistance, but the woman only speaks Spanish, so he cannot understand her. Clay chooses to ignore her and move on, feeling uneasy by her presence. He accelerates as he spots a drone flying close by and notices red smoke coming from its tail. However, when the drone gets closer, Clay discovers the smoke is really red leaflets. George keeps his gun hand in while he drives out to visit the neighbors. His wife was due to fly back today, but he hasn't heard from her since yesterday, so he keeps checking his phone. Regretfully, not a single dialogue has been sent. It appears like the neighbor's house is empty. Surprisingly, the garden is littered with a ton of miscellaneous objects. He enters since the door was left open and discovers a total mess. When George tries to use the neighbor's satellite phone, it also doesn't function, which implies that every American satellite is offline. He finds an expensive watch in the sand after following the trail after realizing there are other items scattered around the shore as he is about to depart. He is startled to see an entire arm when he tries to pick it up, and when he falls, he finds a pilot's body. He notices the jet has crashed on the beach as he scans his surroundings. He hears another jet approaching at that very moment, so he flees and hides inside the home just in time to see this plane crash. Rose is quite irritated at the house because she wants to see Friends' last episode, but none of the electronics are working. She is startled to discover a large herd of deer in the backyard when she rushes outside. She gets her brother Archie to accompany her to the forest, where they discover an abandoned shed. After they enter, Archie informs Rose that someone must be there since he can see her sleeping through the window. Rose gets surprised and smashes her head by mistake when she realizes that Archie is only playing pranks on her. Rose notices another deer, and Archie gets attacked by a bug on the way back to the home. She also observes every bird taking off. After George returns, he acknowledges to Amanda that he had anticipated a thing since he noticed unusual activity in the market. Their talk is cut off as he describes what he witnessed on the beach when they hear explosions in the distance, followed by a loud screeching noise that breaks the windows and harms their ears. Amanda runs into the woods right away to look for her kids, but she can no longer stand the chaos and collapses to her knees in agony. Fortunately, the commotion eventually stops and everyone returns inside the house. Amanda recalls witnessing Danny's excessive purchases and believes he also sensed something bad was going to happen. At that point, Clay reappears and displays to them a brochure that is, ironically, written in Persian. Archie explains that it says, "Death to America," and realizes it's from video games. Terrified, Amanda and Clay choose to disregard George's advice and travel to a relative's home in New Jersey. They keep hearing sirens as they go, and ultimately they discover that a group of white automobiles have blocked the route. Amanda investigates further and discovers that no one is nearby. In actuality, each of these vehicles is a brand new, self-driving model. Abruptly, additional automated vehicles emerge in their behind. Amanda quickly returns to her family and maneuvers her car to avoid getting hit by the fast-moving cars that are obstructing the road. The family leaves as they avoid more oncoming vehicles, and from a distance, it is seen that the mess extends throughout the entire city. George gives the Sanford family permission to reside at the house when they are forced to return there. Archie stays in his room and becomes mischievous while gazing at photos he shot of Ruth as it begins to rain, but he eventually gets ill and goes to bed. Instead, Clay accepts Ruth's invitation to smoke with her and says he feels awful for abandoning the unfortunate woman while driving. They find out there are flamingos in the pool when they hear a sudden splashing sound. After having a drink together inside, Amanda and George reveal to each other that George came to this mansion because a prominent Pentagon client had informed him that a sinister cabal controlled the world. That client abruptly asked George to reorganize his finances and announced that he would be leaving for a time, which alerted George to impending events. George brings Amanda into the room with his music selection since he is sick of hearing about all this gloomy stuff, and they dance for a bit. Amanda notes that they are intoxicated and have spouses when they get too close and embrace. George concedes that nothing has to be done, but he also worries that his wife may have passed away. The ringing sound suddenly starts up again, shattering all of the lights and frightening the flamingos away. Every family chooses to share a bed in order to keep confort as they are now forced to use candles for lighting. They discover Rose is gone the following morning and that she might have taken one of the bikes. Archie abruptly wakes up, throws up blood, and has a temperature. He is astonished to see that all of his teeth are falling out when he checks his mouth. Since Archie believes it's related to the bug bite, George offers to take Clay and Archie to see Danny and get them some medication, while Amanda and Ruth search for Rose in the woods. Ruth and Amanda take a rest at the shed after much searching has yielded nothing, only to get into a fight. Although they don't get along well and argue frequently, at least by talking about their concerns, they were able to get some understanding of one another. They hear a weird noise at that moment, which suggests that something is moving outside. When Amanda emerges, she finds bike tracks, but before she can follow them, she hears a disturbance once more and finds Ruth encircled by a herd of deer. Ruth is prompted to yell at the deer by Amanda, who runs to her side without hesitation. After the deer flee after the prank works, Amanda and Ruth give each other a comforting hug. The men arrived at Danny's house in the meantime, but to their surprise, Danny forces them to back off and emerges carrying a weapon. He says that Archie's illness was most likely caused by radiation from the same noise that occurred in Cuba a few years prior. He believes they are at war since he is aware that the Russians have recalled their citizens from Washington. But Danny is more concerned with supporting his own family, so he declines to assist them, even if Clay is willing to pay and George is an old friend. He believes they should approach the neighbors, who were meant to have a bunker, if they need assistance. When George pulls out his gun and threatens to leave without the medication, they start fighting and aiming at each other. In an attempt to put distance between them, Clay acknowledges that he is a worthless man but pleads for the medication while making a statement about how he and Danny are the same person. All they want is to keep their family safe. Danny eventually gave him the medication in return for cash. Danny provides additional details while Archie is taking the medication. The Koreans carried out this task. Danny has further information, but Clay counters by handing them a brochure that proves they are Iranians. His friend in San Diego informed him that a drone was dropping flyers there prior to the phones being out, but they were in some East Asian language, like Chinese or Korean. If it had been Persian, the friend, a veteran of Iraq, would have known it. According to Danny's idea, the US's many opponents are banding together to subjugate the nation. After the lads got back in the car, George acknowledges that the information Danny provided supports a previous rumor he heard. This three-step plan is intended to topple a nation's government from within. First, they cut off all forms of contact and transportation for the inhabitants. People get alarmed by this, which leads to stage 2, coordinated anarchy. People will start turning against one another, as Danny did, in order to live, and they won't trust any sources of information, which will be supplied by hackers and other materials like flyers. Stage 3 will then occur on its own population, leading to a civil war that ultimately brings about the nation's demise. George and Clay decide to go to the neighbor's bunker with their families in behind. While hunting for Rose in the woods, Amanda and Ruth come to a stop as they witness Manhattan's skyline on fire and hear gunshots and explosions around the city. It turns out that Rose has been residing at the neighbor's house the entire time. She entered through the front door, which she had broken, and is now full of food, but she pauses when she hears her mother calling her name. As Rose turns to leave, she sees a light coming from the basement. Following it, she discovers the emergency bunker supplies, complete with a greenhouse and a gym as well as everything a person could possibly need. Additionally, there is an emergency alert system that advises people to seek shelter due to an attack on the White House and other major U.S. cities, which is raising radiation levels in the vicinity of several population centers. Rose finds out that friends have a large collection of DVDs, so she snatches the disc and enjoys watching the final episode of her favorite show at last. Subscribe and turn on notification for more videos to come.